that you have to check Canvas to see what you're supposed to be doing, because I don't talk about it in class. Since it's on Canvas, I just assume you'll get notices, you'll check it, you'll take care of it, and get it all done in the proper time. Well, where is my marker? Here we go. Page 350, emotions. Now, I think this is so interesting, this stuff about emotions. So, I have a handout for you. Because the textbook talks about basic emotions. How many basic emotions are there? And it depends on who you ask. Emotions are all over the place. People casting. There you go. So, top of the page on the handout, and I'll upload this to Canvas so the people online can look at it too. But it's just from the internet, so you can find this stuff by Googling it too. But it says, it gives what are the basic emotions? And then it gives the theorist a whole list of them there, and what they consider to be basic emotions. And what does it say on page 350 in your textbook about basic emotions? Many people have attempted to identify and describe the basic emotions experienced by humans. And then the textbook mentions Plutchik. The first one on the list, which tells me that Plutchik is probably pretty popular. I tell you what, when I look at this handout and I look at the list of emotions, do all of us have an emotional need for acceptance?
Yeah.
Do we all get a little angry about stuff once in a while? Some more than others. Do we all have a sense of anticipation? You go, what's that? What were you anticipating when you woke up this morning and walked outside? When you stepped outside and saw how would you describe this weather? Can you pick an emotive word to describe this weather? I saw someone yawning, so could we call it sleepy weather?
Yeah.
Another word might be dreary weather. Does anyone know what's really going on scientifically with this weather that we're having? Did anyone drive to school today from some distance? Did you have to turn your windshield wipers on a few times? You know why? There was dew in the air, and that's from the clouds that we normally see up in the sky. This to me is so interesting. When we see the clouds up high, what kind of emotional response do most of us have when we see clouds in the sky? Pleasant ones? Then when those clouds come down and sit on the earth, and you know you're driving through a cloud when all of a sudden a bunch of moisture hits your windshield and you turn your wipers on, and it's not raining or anything, it's just like, okay, I just drove through a cloud, and I just drove through another cloud. So when those same clouds that we look up and have this positive kind of emotion about, when they land on the earth, when they come down here, and we're sitting in the middle of them, then all of a sudden it becomes a dreary kind of thing. We're talking about basic emotions. So once you stepped outside and saw the dreariness of today, did that affect your anticipations for class? Or some of you thinking maybe he'll wake up this morning and won't feel like getting out of bed and coming to school, so we'll show up and all get to go back to our rooms and take a break or take a rest or do something that's more pleasant than what's going on. We all anticipate stuff. And let me give you one of these too, even. We're talking about these basic emotions. We're on page 350 in the textbook. And it's talking about the basic emotions, and I gave you a handout that shows all the different ones. But since Plutchik is so popular, we're running through that list. So we have anticipations. Probably the place where we have the greatest anticipation is over a holiday when we're going to see relatives. Are some of you sick and tired of the relatives coming up to you after not seeing you for about a year and saying, "Oh, you have grown so much. You've just turned into such a beautiful young adult." Well, what are they going to say? "Whoa, you turned out to be ugly." Sometimes I think they just say complimentary things because that's what's expected of them. We're anticipating what's going to happen at a certain time. Christmas, you're anticipating presents. I don't know why, but looking forward to Christmas is just not. See, if I really need something or want something, I pretty much just go get it. I don't have children to raise anymore. It's just my wife and I, and so I don't have a lot of money, but then I don't have a lot of needs either. So if I need something or want something, I go get it. So that means at Christmas time, if my children and my grandchildren decide to buy me something I need, it won't work because I already bought it for myself. So they try to think up some cute little present, right? Do any of you do that for your grandparents? And I'm anticipating getting stuff that I'm probably not going to use. But I know they meant well, so I have to be very polite and say, "Oh, thank you very much." And then when people get old, and they move out of their house and go into a nursing home or something, and you go clean out the house, you find all the presents you gave them for the last 10 years stuck away in a closet or a drawer somewhere. I mean, they were thankful for it. They anticipate you coming and seeing them, but sometimes they probably pretty much have what they want. Disgust. Have any ever been disgusted by something?
Yes.
Don't we say that's disgusting? That's disgusting. Joy. What's the Christian formula for joy? J stands for Jesus first. O stands for others second. And Y stands for yourself last. Does that little Christian motto for joy fly in the world we live in today? No, they're going, no. I'm thinking the world I'm living in keeps talking about you have to take care of yourself first. Let others take care of themselves. And this Jesus thing, you only need that if you're on your deathbed and want to avoid going to hell. And I'm thinking they just don't get it. And what's to me is interesting is that we Christians who embrace this formula for joy, what happens? We end up living a very joyous, joyful, however you want to say it, life. And when other people say, what's your secret to happiness? It's no secret. It's having a relationship with Jesus Christ where you love Him for dying on the cross to give you a brand new life, to take away your sin, and you have a relationship with Him. I mean, people put on Facebook now, I'm in a relationship. I mean, what can we all put up there? I'm in a relationship. And who's the most significant relationship I have in my life? My relationship with Jesus Christ, my relationship with His Heavenly Father, who is now my adopted Father. Isn't that the most important relationship we have going for us? And by the way, did God create us to have a relationship with Him? In other words, as we talked about in the last chapter, He made us spiritual people, or as in the handout I gave you out earlier, that He made us spiritual people to have that relationship. And if we have that relationship taken care of, we have a lot of joy in life. And the people who are passing up that vital relationship are missing out on so much joy. And then when they ask you, how can you be so happy? And you tell them it's simply Jesus first, others second, and myself last, they go, that will never fly. That will never work. And I'm thinking, well, it does. And I said, well, I'm not going there. I'm not trying that. That just doesn't sound like a good idea to me. Thinking, well, maybe you haven't embraced any good ideas lately. And if where you are is kind of a dead-end street, then maybe we ought to re-examine what's going on. Fear. Do any of you experience any fear?
Yes.
I'm driving down the road, and I'm driving the speed limit. Going out of town this past weekend to see a grandson playing sports, and I'm in this middle lane driving the speed limit, and two huge long trucks pass me on both sides. Aren't trucks supposed to be driving slower than cars? Is there has that regulation changed? Does anyone know what the speed limit is for truck drivers when the interstate says 70 for the rest of us?
I think it depends on their cargo.
Does it?
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Because those guys, but they weren't even going 70. They were going like 75 or 80. And I'm going, whoa.
Yeah. In Michigan, it's 70 for cars, 65 for semi-trucks.
Okay.
Here, all the highways I've driven on say 65 for everyone. But nobody goes it.
I
Not
know.
even the
Isn't that disgusting? And you think, if I slow down, then I'm going to get run over. If I speed up with my Michigan license plate, someone's going to give me a ticket. It's a no-win situation. It's just scary. And that's probably the word we use most, is it's just scary out there. Something scary happened. I'm out watching a ball game and I hear this loud thunder. Oh, they better get those kids off the field. They could get hit with lightning. Scary. Sadness. Sadness. What are some things that make you sad? Seeing a guy standing by the road saying, homeless vet, please help me. That's sad. The guy served in the military, served our country, and he doesn't have a place to live. That's just not right. Maybe we should take him home to live at our house. Anyone ever suggest that when you saw a homeless person somewhere? My wife says, that's so sad. I go, so you think we ought to take him home to live with us? We have a spare bedroom. No, she goes, let's just give him some money. And I said, are you sure he'll spend the money on food? She goes, I don't know. I said, maybe we should just go ask him what he wants from McDonald's and go over there and buy some and take it back to him. You understand? It's just a sad situation. And part of my personal frustration with homeless people is aren't there a lot of people that are providing homes, especially for veterans now, and places for them to go? But some of them are experiencing some post-military trauma that makes them a little paranoid, and so they're not sure they want to go someplace where people are telling them what to do because they've been in the military where everybody told them what to do every day. And some of them think their best option is being homeless. Where can they get the help? Years ago, if a person had mental problems and they were out on the streets, somebody would pick them up, the police usually, and take them to a mental hospital where they could get some help. Do any of you ever remember as a child driving by what was called a mental institution? There was one in our little town in Oklahoma where I grew up. And it was where people went to live who couldn't take care of themselves. A few years ago, somebody in our government decided, or in our legal system or somewhere, that if they're not hurting anybody, it's not fair to keep them locked up in an institution. So we need to open the gates and let people come and go as they please. So what did some of the mentally ill people do? They left when the gate was open, and they didn't come back to sleep or eat there because they forgot where they were or couldn't find their way back and became homeless. Because we made a decision in our society that it's not humane to keep people in an institution if they're not harming anybody. That we ought to let people make their own choices. And I guess what we probably ought to add to that is, if we decide to let everybody make their own choice, do we also have to decide to let everybody suffer the consequences of the choices they make? I mean, don't choices have consequences? If you say, I'm tired of driving an old car, I'm just going to go buy a new one. What's the consequence of going to a car dealer, smelling a new car and saying, that's what I want, a new car smell? You sign on the line, they give you the key, you drive off the lot, and then what do you have to do every month for the next 4 years of your life? Send a check to those people to pay for that car. The consequences of making those decisions. Have you ever been surprised by anything? Who likes surprises? 1, 2, 3. Who does not like surprises? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you people who like surprises, you plan surprise parties for the other 6 of us, those 5 and me. And what do we do, 7?
I mean, it depends on whether it's a bad surprise or a good surprise. But if it involves people jumping out and scaring me, not fun.
Don't surprise me. My wife called me at work early in our marriage and said, are you coming home? I said, and I was a principal and a teacher in a Christian school. And I said, as soon as I get all this work done for tomorrow. She said, okay. So then she calls me an hour later. When are you coming home? I said, when I get my work done. What's the problem? She said, well, I just wish you were here. I'm going, well, okay. I'll just quit working and come on home. I'll bring my work with me and do it later, after dinner tonight. Oh, thank you, she says. So I get in the car, I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, what could be going on that I couldn't stay at work and finish what I was doing? I walk in the house and a whole bunch of people go, surprise! I go, what? They go, it's your birthday. I said, so? Anyone else feel like I did? So? Yeah, if you're born, the day you were born comes around every year. Tell me about it. Whoa, they go. What's the problem? I was in the middle of a project. My wife called and told me I had to come home. After that party was over, she goes, well, that didn't work very well, did it? I said, Nina, I don't like surprises. Never have, never will. Just tell me what's going to happen. Don't surprise me. Well, she said, if you would have known we were planning a party, you probably wouldn't have come home. There you go. Then don't plan the party. Oh. She goes, but I love surprises. Well, okay. I'll surprise you from time to time with something, but don't reciprocate, please. The best thing you can do somebody feel, just don't surprise me. I just don't like it. I don't know why. It's just the way I'm wired. And you go, that's weird. Okay, so I'm weird. In fact, when you talk over this list of basic emotions here, will we discuss an area, if you went down through the list and looked at all of them? The last one on the list, Werner and Graham, they only have two basic emotions, happiness and sadness. You're either happy or you're sad. And if you're happy, you're probably very accepting of what's going on. You don't get very angry about stuff, and you have positive anticipations, and there's not a lot of things that disgust you. And you have a lot of joy, and there's not much that scares you either, and you're not very sad. And surprises, you can take them or leave them. If you're kind of a sad person, you probably don't get enough acceptance, and a whole bunch of stuff makes you mad, and if something's going to happen, it'll probably be bad, and that's disgusting. Everything I see is disgusting. I just see disgusting stuff around me. And joy, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And fear, scared to death of everything. And my life is just so sad. When I was in Russia visiting my daughter and son-in-law when they were missionaries over there, my granddaughter and I were going somewhere, and she said, oh, that's so sad, Poppy. And I said, what? She goes, those two old men on the bench are just talking about how miserable their lives are. And how here they are at the end of life. They don't have a job anymore, just talking about the misery they have in life. And I looked at her and I said, think about it. If you don't know Christ, if you don't have a relationship with God, okay, think about it. Young people who don't have a relationship with God, they're just not getting off on the right foot, okay? But can you see where a teenager who just isn't paying attention to what God has to say about life, they can wake up when they in their early 20s and get saved and have a full life ahead of them. What happens to a 65-year-old when he finally realizes at the end of life that he's wasted his whole 65 years and life's been nothing but pain and misery? What do you think happens when you tell him, you can have a better life? Even if you only have a few years left, you can put your faith and trust in Christ and experience the joy of God's forgiveness and His acceptance. And you think 65 years on this earth is a long time. It's nothing compared to an eternity with God. Now, can you see where a 21-year-old might be more open to accepting Christ for the rest of their life? The 65-year-old has a tendency to say, if you've ever witnessed to people in a nursing home, it's too late, it's too late, it's too late. They just won't turn that corner. That's why child evangelism, I think, is so popular, because children haven't been tainted by the world around them. They haven't been so influenced by the rest of society that they're not open to those spiritual things. And God touches their heart, and they develop a relationship with Him. And even if during their teenage years they start listening too much to the wrong crowd, they still know something's not right, and they eventually come back to that. But doesn't your heart go out for people who have lived their whole life and realize at the end of life, I just wasted it when I could have been living for God? So recognize that there might be some truth in that happiness, sadness thing, that those are the two basic emotions. But every theorist has their own reasons for Well, right in the middle. Moyer has pain and pleasure. And I'm thinking, okay, he puts pain and pleasure. Werner and Graham put happiness and sadness. Pain is sadness, pleasure is happiness. No, happiness includes certain pleasures, but pleasure is not always happiness. I have a very comfortable mattress to sleep on. This morning when my alarm went off, I go, no, that can't be time to get up yet, can it? And I look outside and see this weather, and I'm thinking, you know, what would be the most pleasurable thing I could do right now? Did anyone have a thought like that this morning? You woke up and said, the most pleasurable thing I could do would be to hit this button, not even hit the snooze alarm, just turn it off, roll over, and go back to sleep. That would bring me a great deal of pleasure. And then after I've done it, and I wake up 2 hours later, I'm filled with all of this pain. From indulging this little off time of pleasure, and now I feel guilty, and I didn't find out what I need to do, and my friends go, were you sick? No, I just felt like sleeping in, so I did. And they tell you that that's not very smart. That's no way to be successful in life. So you understand that this pain and pleasure thing, to me, is too shallow. Probably if I was going to pick two, I'd go with the happiness and sadness thing. There are a whole bunch of things that come together to make for a happy life, and a whole bunch of other things that come together to make for sadness in life. And every choice you make will pretty much have a consequence that will result in more happiness or more sadness. Okay, so that's enough talking about that, the basic emotions. Here's a deeper list, it says on the handout, of emotions as described in Shaver, where emotions are categorized into a short tree structure. And so what they do here is they take love, joy, surprise, anger, sadness, and fear, and they call these the 6 primary emotions. Now, how does that compare with, let's see, Plutarch's list? Oh, the textbook's list on page 351. On page 351, what is the textbook's list as basic emotions? Yeah, let's look at what the textbook says. Bottom of the page, happiness. So I took this little chart and I took my pencil and I circled happiness. Oh, that's over here under joy. From joy, look at cheerfulness, and then you go over to happiness. See it there? Circle it. And then surprise. I circled that one. That's one of the 6. Sadness. That's one of the 6. Fear. That's one of the 6. Disgust. That's under anger. See, under anger, it's got irritation, exasperation, rage, disgust, envy, torment, and anger. And I circled anger. So I'm saying, okay, so what is this guy on this handout? What does Shaver mention in their list that the textbook didn't mention? And you could say, well, the textbook didn't mention joy. No, because it uses the word happiness. You follow me? In place of joy. And you could call cheerfulness, zest, contentment, pride, optimism, enthrallment, and relief as all components of happiness. Do you follow how you could change the words on where you put stuff on this? But the author in our textbook didn't have love as one of them listed. See, I kind of wonder if we have so many songs about love and so many stories about love, there must be something going on in our emotional world to where love would be a component that would be an important one to consider. In other words, you see, all the others, we could switch happiness and joy and just have that a different word for that category. But would it be important to have that sixth category that Shaver mentioned called love? I mean, how often do we use that word? Every day if you're married. You tell your wife you love her. Why? Because it's important for her to hear those words. Did all of you hear that often from your parents? They would say, I love you. I never heard that from my parents. I knew they loved me, but I never heard it. But when I got married, I read this book about how to treat your wife, and I started saying I love you, and it ended up being a very pleasant, a very happy thing to do. So a very joyful thing to do if we're using these 6 categories here. So I thought when we have children, maybe I'll just tell them on a regular basis I love them. And it happens that we had 2 daughters. So I tell these 2 daughters every day how much I love them. And so here they are, grown today with their own families. And if I talk to one of them on the phone, then every now and then I test it to see if it really still matters. So when she gets ready to hang up, what do you girls say to your father when you get ready to hang up from the phone? I love you, Dad? Do you say that to your dad? Okay, does your dad say I love you too? Okay, what if he didn't say I love you too and he just stood there on the phone listening to see what would happen next? You've never had a dad who did that to you? Well, you don't have a dad who studies psychology, aren't you glad? But they go, Dad, are you still there? I said, yeah. And I go, I love you, girl. They go, okay, Dad. And then they realize I'm messing with them again. And what I've discovered is, for as long as I live, will my daughters want to hear me say I love you to them? Will that make them happy campers? Yes or no? Now, these daughters come along and give me grandsons. Yeah, it's because you have girls, Tom. Boys don't need to hear that. So I have these grandsons. Guess what I say to them every day when I see them when they're little kids? I love you, bud. And what do you think they say back to me? Because they reciprocate. I love you too, Poppy. That's what my grandkids call me. My name's Poppy. So they say, I love you too, Poppy. Now, my grandsons are grown now. I mean, I've got grown grandsons who are married and who are about to graduate from college. When I see them and I say, I love you, bud, what do they say back to me? My grown grandsons, I love you too, Poppy. I'm telling you, this verbally expressing love. Now, if you say it and you don't show it, it's obviously hypocritical. But if you show love to people and then, and I will tell you, since I didn't grow up with it, learning to use that word was a little awkward for me. But I found out how much joy it brings to my life to use it. And if my Heavenly Father tells me in the Bible how much He loves me, then it seems to me like as a father, I should tell my children and grandchildren how much I love them. And so once I started figuring this out, after my dad died when I was he was in his late 50s when he had a heart attack. So my mom was on her own. And so once I had figured out this thing about telling my wife and children I love them, when my mom was all alone and I would talk to her on the phone because she would call and want to visit and stuff, I'd say, I love you, Mom. And she would say, I love you too. And then when I would go see her and I would say that to her, she'd get a little tear in her eye. And why was that? Because she wasn't used to somebody saying, I love you. And one day we were in Oklahoma visiting my mom and for a dinner, and my sister goes, Tom, how come Mom cooks all of your favorite food for dinner and she doesn't cook mine? And of course, sibling rivalry. I said, because she likes me more than she does you. And that couldn't be, because my little sister who said that's the youngest, so you all know how that is with the youngest, right? Do all of you have a youngest sibling who is spoiled, rotten, Yeah, I mean, it's just sad, isn't it? They're the last one, and the parents are not going to have another one, so it's just crazy what they do for them. And so I just said, she likes me more than she does you, which wasn't true. But what was going on? My mother was responding in kind to me telling her how much I love her. I mean, if I would have figured this out while my grandparents were still alive, I would have been saying it to them too. But they were gone before I had it all figured out. And if it seems awkward, just do something awkward because it's biblical and watch how it enriches your life. Okay, that's enough of this stuff because we've got a lot of stuff to cover here. So let's move on to page, 352, happiness. I Googled happiness and I found, this is what I found on the internet. 4 keys to happiness, 6 keys to happiness, 10 keys to happiness, 3 keys to happiness, 5 keys to happiness, 37 keys to happiness. It is amazing what you can find on the internet about happiness. And that one, 37 keys to happiness, I thought, I can't pass that one up. So, I printed it, made copies, so you can have 37 keys to happiness. So, being happy is not rocket science, and obviously, there's a whole bunch of people who are writing about it on the internet and in the literature out there. So it isn't like it's not a topic that hasn't been covered somewhere. Let's see. Would you like to hear? Okay, let's take the shortest one on my list. While you're looking that list over, because you can't help but look at it. What's the first thing on the list?
Be here now.
And I go, what? Live in the present. You can't change the past. The future isn't here yet. This is a day that the Lord has given us. Let us do what? Rejoice and be glad in it. Does that sound like a Bible verse? It is. Check it out. So what I think is interesting, some of these people who have researched happiness and come up with these little platitudes for happiness, I wonder if they plagiarize the Bible. See, I used to think there's a whole bunch of people plagiarizing the Bible because they're taking God's suggestions for happiness and then they're putting them in a book and selling them and they're not giving God credit for it. But then I realized when I was at the university, no, these people haven't really read the Bible. They're afraid to read it for some reason. They don't read the Bible, so they don't even know God said that stuff. They have just observed people in life and watched what people are doing that make them happy and drawing these conclusions. And that's why I said to a guy one time who said, Tom, as a Christian, how do you handle all the stuff we teach over here? And I said, it's worth my money to pay you to come here because I learn a lot of good stuff from you, but I don't accept everything you say. But I said, you know what? Really, it's not such a bad deal because when I read something you say and I think that doesn't sound right and I throw it out, after you try it for a while, you throw it out too. I just kind of get a head start on you. And he goes, well, just where? And I said, I have this yardstick that I measure what you say. And he said, well, what's your yardstick? And what did I tell him my yardstick was? The Bible. And when you contradict the Bible, I don't go there because I know that's a bad place to go. And later you determined that was a bad place to go. We shouldn't have gone there either. I just avoided the grief by staying over here on the happy side of life. Remain aware. Be aware of everything that's making that moment possible. I mean, just be aware of how blessed you are in life. Oh, we have a song about that, don't we? Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. We have so many songs in our hymn books that help us do the kind of things that make for being happy. Gratitude, showing appreciation, it just makes you happier. I mean, if you don't believe this, no matter what you think of the food in the cafeteria, if every time you go over there to eat, you stop by and say, "Hey Joe, I sure appreciate all the hard work you do to keep us all fed," it'll even start to make the food taste better. I'm just telling you, this happiness stuff is just a simple process of doing things. And again, if you want to have a project, what are the kind of things the Bible tells me I should do to be happy? Put that on a card, start reading at Genesis, go to Revelation, and write down everything you find, and then just start practicing those things and watch what it does in your life. Okay, so let's look at some of these keys to happiness. Okay, here's one with 3 keys to happiness. Do what you love. Now see, so do you have something you love? Yeah, I love to sleep in. No, Tom. Sleeping in is a pleasurable experience. But if all you did was sleep in and didn't do anything else, you would wake up, if you didn't have any commitments for that day, it would have been a very pleasant experience. But if you had things you should have been doing, then you're going to feel kind of guilty. So make sure you're using love. Well, what did that other handout that I give you? I mean, what were all the things that were listed under love? Affection, lust, and longing. So affection is a big part of love. Lust is just that satisfying your own almost fleshly desires. I have a passion for peach juice that my doctor says, you got to quit drinking all that juice, Tom. It's not good for you. But when you look at love, you say that affection word probably is the more inclusive word that includes more. And a longing, what's that song? A longing to see his face to face. So I guess what I'd say with these 3 keys is fall in love with Jesus Christ and with your Heavenly Father and spend your life loving Him. Have what you need. Okay, that's the second thing for the 3 keys. I'm just taking the short one. Have what you need. Okay, basically God provides all of our needs. Be content with what you have. And help other people. See how that other people comes in? On the shortest list here, helping other people. So let's go to 4 keys to happiness. Friendliness, compassion, those are both having to do with other people. And cheerfulness, just be cheerful about life. And gratitude. Oh, 10 keys to happiness. Yeah, 10, just like the 10 commandments. That must sound powerful. Giving, relating, exercising. What's that all about? Now, I can see giving to others and relating to other people. That's going to make you happy. What's exercising? If you're not taking care of the body that God has put you in, the temple of the Holy Spirit, you're not going to be as happy as if you're taking good care of it. Awareness, and the handout talks about that. Having goals, you keep on learning, developing resilience, emotions. What did I put down there? A love for what's good, acceptance, and finding meaning in life. I mean, do you understand? You can go, and then I took happiness and looked at the Bible, and I found Deuteronomy 24:5. Any idea what Deuteronomy 24:5 says about happiness? Think about where it is in the Bible. Happy is the man who finds a wife. What? Yes. A wife is a happy thing for a man. Ecclesiastes 9:7. Happiness is having some bread to eat. And you could just go through the scriptures. Psalm 128 verse 2, Proverbs 3:18. I mean, just excuse me, just look up some verses that have to do with happiness. And that's why I gave you the handout with all the other words. Take those words and look them up in a concordance, or type them in your tablet where you have your Bible, and see what kind of verses show up, and say, you know, this thing about being happy is not just exclusive for a few people. Okay. Boy, you could take this 37 keys to happiness and spend a lot of time with that. And the last one on there is be like a cow. I go, what? That's why I printed it. I thought, this is so cool, something to think about. I mean, look how content they are out there in the pasture. Learn to be a little content about things in life. Okay. You can see those pictures on page 353. And, you know, I'll confess to you that they tell us what those pictures mean, but do you have trouble reading people's expressions? See, I do. And one of my daughters came to me one time when she was just little, and I was sitting there on the couch reading a book, and when I read intently. And when I'm reading intently, well, she said, Dad, and I said, what? And she goes, what are you so mad about? I said, who's mad? I'm not mad. And she said, well, you look mad. And so I got up and tried to hold the look and went in and looked in the mirror, and I'm going, whoa, sure enough. So my facial expression, while I was just absorbing information, acquiring new information from a book that makes me happy to learn something new, my facial expression made me look other than happy. And apparently my voice also sounds like I'm sometimes not very happy. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, right now on page 356, when you start talking about nonverbal communication emotions, voice quality is one of them. And my voice is kind of raspy. And doesn't have my wife has this, she has this nice, soft little voice that's just so soothing and so comfortable. Can't you just hear her? Girls, would you like to help me clean the house today? And what do our two daughters say? No, I'd rather go out and play. And I go, girls, did you hear what your mother said? He said, yeah, she asked me if I wanted to help clean the house. And the correct answer is, I told her I wanted to go out and play. I know what you told her, but that's not the correct answer. When your mother says, would you like to help me clean the house? The appropriate answer is, yes, Mom, I would love to, and get over there and help her. Okay, Dad, okay, don't go ballistic on me. So, you understand? My voice and demeanor has been okay, it could be, now I don't know, maybe my voice and demeanor has always been like this. Because one time I was having a discussion with my sister, and she goes, don't use your teacher voice with me, Tom. I'm not one of your students. So I'm thinking maybe my voice is always, maybe that's why I got in trouble in school. Because when I would ask a question in class, my voice was like, my voice had disrespect in it or something. I don't know what's going on. But for sure, it'd be nice if I could just blame my two daughters for not being submissive, for me being so brusque with them, so straightforward, so my voice quality leaves something to be desired. And I work on that when I'm around little children and sensitive people. Facial expressions, and some of you said, yeah, I can read those quite well, and I have trouble with that. So I have to, and Nina will say sometimes, she'll say, Tom, didn't you pick up on that guy's facial expression? I said, nope. If he didn't say anything, and if he's thinking something, why didn't he say it? Say, well, because listen to your tone of voice. I'm going, what? You understand that you just have to, you need help from other people. And my wife is a real help to me in terms of working on this voice quality thing. And facial expressions. With my little kids thought he was mad when he reads a book. just because of my facial expression. And body language, boy, this is so... Okay, I looked at this body language thing on page 356, and this is just scary. Okay, and what's the first thing they mention? Slumping and straightness of the back supply clues about which emotion someone is feeling. Okay, you tell me, what does this convey to you when you see me sitting down here like this? This is the most comfortable place. I mean, this is my favorite way to sit in a chair. I mean, it just feels good physically. But what does it convey emotionally? See, I don't know. All I know is when I sat like that in school, did any of you like to do, okay, do any of the rest of you like to slump like that? So have you ever heard teachers say, sit up straight, sit up straight, sit up straight, like I was doing something wrong when I was just being comfortable? Because apparently that slumping conveys a message. And so because that's my favorite way to sit, it's best if I stand up when I teach, so I don't convey the wrong emotional message when I'm talking to people. But just be aware of all this body language stuff. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just amazing what goes on here with this body language. Are you relaxed? Are you tense? Okay, I'm a pretty, okay, I think my wife would say this, that his motor, she says this, she says, it's hard to go to sleep next to you at night because your motor's going, my metabolism just runs fast all the time. She said, don't you ever relax? And I go, I'm relaxed. But you understand that I'm a high-strung personality. So what that means is I'm tense a lot. But it doesn't bother me. But can you see how it could bother other people? Why don't you just stop for a minute and sit down and relax? Eye contact. I gave you the secret, didn't I, to eye contact earlier in this class? See, when you're talking to people, okay, all of you kind of look at me for a minute, and I'm going to take an occasion to look in all of your eyes. When you're talking to people, eye contact is very important, okay? But I'm not looking at your eyes. I'm walking through this room, and I'm maintaining eye contact, but I'm not looking at your eyes. Can you tell what I'm looking at? I'm looking at the tip of your nose. And it's a little entertaining to look at the tips of people's noses. It makes me want to smile inside. So it makes me a happier person when I'm making eye contact. But to make real eye contact, I mean, now I'll come back and make real eye contact. I'll look right in your eyes. But when I do that, I read someplace years ago that the eye is the gateway to the soul. So I kind of feel like I'm invading your privacy. And who knows, maybe looking right at your eyes, I might be inviting you to invade my soul privacy. You understand how that eye contact thing can make me a little nervous? So I did some research and found out ways to appear to have eye contact when I'm just looking at your funny little noses. And you go, well, look in the mirror. Your nose is funny too. Okay, so then, and look at the next thing, personal space. Would you rather ride an elevator up to the 5th floor, or would you rather walk up the stairway? If you push the button for the elevator, and you're on the 2nd floor, going up to the 5th floor, and it's full of people. I mean, I don't know how many times I would say, oh, there's room for one more, come on in. I go, no, thanks, I'll wait for the next one. I just don't like being jammed, packed in a room together where we're all crowded together. And I have more of a need for personal space than other people do. You travel other places in the world where you get on a piece of public transportation where everybody's standing up and holding on to it. I mean, picture that one. We're all up here holding on to a rail or a little handle. We've got our arms up in the air. So if we've been working our underarms are right there in somebody else's face if they're shorter, and we're all jammed together where there's no room to even move. I'm getting off of this tram, whatever it's called in England, and I'm getting on a bus where there aren't as many people because we have our own seat and we have some personal space. Explicit acts. You say, what's that all about? I had an aunt one time who was having a discussion at my grandfather's house, and she said, well, my husband and I never yell at each other. And he said, but I'll bet you slam the door awful hard when you leave the room. And her face got red. Some people don't raise their voices. They just do what? Slam things around to express their frustration in other ways. What does a slap on the back mean? What does a handshake mean? What does a hug mean? Maybe you ought to Google those before you start using them again to see, what am I conveying to people by these explicit acts? Oh, page 357 says something that I put a little note by. Many of us overestimate our ability to interpret nonverbal cues from other people. We tend to think that these nonverbal cues, like for example, I'm hyperactive, and so when I go from point A, now not so much anymore, but used to be on campus, when I'd be going from point A to point B, going from my office over to the other building to check the mailbox or something, I'm pep stepping it, is what I call it. I'm not going to waste any time getting over there and getting back. And one time a student saw me and they said, I need to talk to you. I said, well, come by my office. Well, they said, I figured you were too busy. I said, what would make you think I was too busy? And here's what they said, because of the way you're always running every place you go. Now see, I thought running every place I go, well, I'm not really running, but pep stepping every place I go was just a way to get more done in the day, and it was a way to get some good exercise. But what was it conveying to another person? That he's so busy he doesn't have time to talk to me. And that's when I started doing things about what do you do to let people know you're not busy? And I learned that you keep the door to your office open so people can stop by and visit. And you do things to let them know that they're welcome to come in and spend time with you. And when I'm talking to my wife, even though I can carry on a conversation and read the paper at the same time, what do I do, ladies, when my wife wants to talk to me about something? Do I keep reading the paper?
No.
Nope, you lay it down, you make eye contact and give her your undivided attention. And if the topic is a little boring, just look at her nose and it'll make you smile. Then look at her eyebrows, and then look at her ears, and look at her lips, and look at her chin, and you'll find something on that face that'll make you smile, and she'll be so happy to see you smiling rather than showing boredom during the conversation. It's just the idea of I'm trying to be aware of how other people interpret, and remember, there's a lot of people around me who overestimate their ability to interpret my nonverbal cues, and being aware of that means that I don't react or become judgmental when somebody misinterprets one of my nonverbal cues. I just recognize that's just going on. People think they can do that. Hey, if someone comes up to you and says, you need some help? I walk into school carrying 2 briefcases and somebody meets me at the door and says, do you need some help? Now, what would be the obvious thing? What would you say if you had a briefcase in each hand and someone else said you need some help and they were ready to open the door for you? Would you say yes? Who would say yes? 1, 2, 3, 4. Who would say no? Yeah, because I do it myself. I don't need any help. And see, my reluctance to accept help, I don't know how many times this got me in trouble. And it's just like, just be willing to accept some help, Tom. Why is it you say no when someone says you need any help? I don't know why. It's just part of my personality. When you're angry, what do? I mean, the Bible says, be angry and sin not. So it says we're going to get angry about stuff. But what do? And somewhere, I read something years ago that said, you know what, Tom? When you're angry and you want to say something about it, just swallow your anger. Just swallow it and be done with it, and don't let it mess up a relationship. What do you do when you're sad? What do you do when you're happy? Page 360 talks about culture and emotions. Does that surprise you that every culture has its own effect? The Dutch are more attentive to facial expressions. The Japanese are more attentive to the tone of your voice. I'd be in trouble in Japan, wouldn't I? Page 361 talks about, what does 361 talk about? Facial expressions of emotions are very similar cross-culturally, but display rules differ substantially from culture to culture. For example, let's see. If I'm doing this, if I'm standing here talking to you and saying, do you people understand what I'm saying? Now, what does that little finger pointing out there mean?
You're scolding us?
Now see, that's where we would interpret that as he's scolding us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a cultural thing. That finger sticking out there is he's scolding us. Oh, well, I didn't mean that. Well, that's why you have to find out. And when you go to another culture, do all you can to read up on the cultural rules for how we relate to one another. I mean, in Europe, where most people use public transportation for everything and don't drive their own car someplace, or even have a car, because there's so much public transportation, surprisingly enough, they get on a bus or a train, and if they want to say something, most of them don't even talk to their friend next to them. If they want to visit, they'll often leave and go to another car, to the restaurant car, to visit, because everybody kind of sits quietly to respect other people's quietness. It's like a respect for each other's space on public transportation. And Americans often don't get it. And one day I was traveling through Germany, and these two guys from the States here, college guys traveling across Europe, I finally got up and went back. I said, guys, you know, I don't know if you realize this, but in Europe, when people on the train talk to each other, they almost whisper so they won't disturb other people. You might not even know this, but your loud conversation is disturbing a whole bunch of people around here. But Europeans are too kind to say anything to you. They'll just, after you leave, tell their friends that they met some more ugly Americans. And one of the guys said, well, so what should I do? Stand up and bend over so you can give me a spanking? I said, well, I don't know. Is that what your mother does when you do something foolish? And then he and his buddy got up and went out and went to the restaurant car. So, and guess what happened when I went back to my seat? All these Europeans were smiling at me and going, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because they didn't even know it. They were messing up their lives, creating all kinds of trauma for people just because they didn't understand the culture. So learn what you can about cultures before you go someplace else. Okay, I'm hurrying because I have to start chapter 10 today. Chapter 10 on page 365 is all about lifespan development. What is this? The study of how people change from birth to old age is called developmental psychology. So in this chapter, we're going to go all the way from birth to old age. We're going to take this whole area and try to cover it in one chapter. Although it says on page 365, although there are many common patterns to human development, each person's development is also in some ways unique. Just like our fingerprints are unique and our biology is unique, so our developmental history is unique. We each have our own little story to tell. And it's in the human growth class, isn't it? You don't write a paper on your journey, your pilgrimage to wholeness, do you? Do you have a paper called that, your pilgrimage to wholeness? No. That's in human growth and development. And it probably wouldn't hurt for you to just on your own someday sit down and say, I'm going to write a little autobiography of how I became the person I am today. How much of what I think I am because of the way God created me, how much of what I am today I am because of my parents' influence, the influence of my my siblings. Just begin, so to speak, to write your own, since you're a unique person, write your own personal developmental history as to how you've developed over time and how you've become the person that you are. And by the way, okay, if you're a math and a psychology teacher, and people say, what do you do for a living? And I'm going, I teach math and psychology. And they go, that's weird. Now, see, if you told somebody what you did for a living and they said, that's weird, would you have this reaction? Well, you say, I'm weird. You're the weird one. What do you do for a living? How weird is that? I mean, do you understand? We can get real defensive about this stuff. Now, as I think through my own autobiographical unique development, I've been told from the time I was a little kid that I was weird. Anybody here told that from the time you were a little kid? Okay, see, all that means is that's their way of saying you're unique. You didn't know that. You took it the wrong way. So no, you're unique. You're one of a kind. But see, I got so used to hearing that it didn't bother me later in life. So when I became a high school teacher in a Christian school where I was teaching math and Bible, people would say, you like math? Yes. You love the Bible? Yes. You're weird. And I'm going, yeah, so be it. It's almost like that my childhood experience helped prepare me for what kind of reactions I would have to what I do as an adult. And I still hear it from people. In fact, people will say, how did you end up becoming a math and a psychology teacher? Well, I actually started out as a Bible and a math teacher in a Christian school, but I encountered all these people who couldn't understand math. So I decided to start researching why people struggled with math so much, and I discovered this phrase out there. Have any of you ever heard of math anxiety? None of you have heard of it? Maybe that's just because I'm a teacher and I study that stuff. Okay, there's all kinds of articles out there in journals about math anxiety. You don't hear people talking about English anxiety. You don't. It's like, why would they be anxious about math and not anxious about English? Because they use English every day and they only have to do math for a few things. And it's like, oh, okay, so now what makes people anxious about math? What can I do? Because if you're anxious about something, if you're anxious when you're driving a car, are you more apt to have an accident or make a mistake? I mean, you know how to drive. Remember when you took your driving test to get your license, how you knew how to drive, but once there's somebody with a little pad writing stuff down, it makes you a little anxious and you're not near as good at it as you were before you got in the car with that person giving the test. So I thought, I need to do something to diminish math anxiety in my classroom. And I started studying these articles, and a lot of them talked about the psychology of what's going on in people's heads. And wouldn't you know, I started studying psychology and said, whoa, this is cool stuff. I can get inside a person's head and change their thinking about math. And then I thought, I wonder if I could do that in other areas of life. Oh, you'd be amazed at what you can do. When our girls were little, we would go to the mall and they would go up to one of these little shops where they sold all kinds of sweet stuff, and they would say, "Dad, can we buy something?" And I said, "Yeah, I suppose. Let's look around and see if they have anything worth buying. Because some of this stuff just isn't good for you." And so we're walking around and looking, and they say, "What about that?" And I said, "Well, that's funny because the colors really look good, and the shapes even look good, but the stuff in those little things are just terrible. You eat you eat a whole handful of them, they'll make you sick." Really? Yeah. So we keep walking around and looking at stuff, and I'm just talking about what would be good for them, what wouldn't, and then I say, "Now that over there, that might be good for you. That stuff is all made out of yogurt." And they go, "Yeah, that sounds good. Yogurt's good." Now, why'd they say yogurt's good? Because we eat yogurt at our house a lot, and they like it. So they buy some little yogurt balls to munch on while they're walking around the mall at the candy shop. And when we go up to pay for it, I said, "You made a good choice, girls. That's healthy stuff. That won't make you sick while we're walking around here shopping." And I still remember the high school girl who was running the little shop working there. I'm paying her, and she's just shaking her head. She goes, "I can't believe you've done this to your children." Now, what have I done to my children? I've so influenced their thinking that they would go into a candy shop and order little yogurt balls to suck on while they're walking around. And I'm thinking, you're talking to me about what I've done to my children? You know all those children who come in here and buy a handful of jelly beans and put them in their mouth and get an upset stomach and get sick from the sugar? Somebody has messed with their head big time, because that isn't normal to eat all that sugar and make yourself sick. You understand? Everybody's messing with us somehow. So I've just said study psychology and learn how to help people. Okay, let's start talking about this development stuff. The stages, where do they talk about the stages? Do they talk about those on page 365 and 366? If they don't, here are the stages. They're childhood, and they actually talk about all of these in this book. The stages are childhood, adolescence, young adult, middle age, and old age. Any idea what ages are childhood? Anybody want to guess what ages are childhood? 0 to 12 is pretty much called childhood. Oh, because after childhood comes adolescence. What is adolescence? It's your teenage years. Now, different people divide this differently, but I like the division. Childhood goes 0 to 12. Adolescence goes 13 to 19. And when our daughters were going through adolescence, they would say, "Dad, what is wrong with me?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're just going through adolescence. That's just part of going from childhood to adulthood. It's a transition time that we call adolescence." And I still remember one of my daughters said, "Dad, it sounds like a disease." I said, "It sort of is like a disease. You know, it's uncomfortable. And it's awkward." So just realize that there's this time frame when you're called an adolescent, which goes your teenage years, 13 to 19. Then you become a young adult. Now, okay, see now, young adult, I have on my notes here, young adult is like 20 to 40. Well, do any of you know some 20-year-olds who aren't as grown up as some 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds? And it's like, yeah, there's some people who are 20 and 21 and 22 and maybe some even 25 who still haven't made it through adolescence. So different people have different rates of moving through this, but why do we call 20 to 40 a young adult? I mean, okay, why would we call a 20-year-old an adult? Because they're not a teenager anymore. Have any of you had your 20th birthday yet? No? Are you looking forward to it when you're no longer a teenager? No? You're having such a marvelous adolescence, you don't want it to end. Can it just last forever? No. My one grandson, who's a sophomore in high school, watches his brother, who's a senior in college this year, and he goes, you know, just growing up is not always fun, is it, Bobby? I said, no, it isn't. I said, enjoy it while you can, because you have to go to work, you have to take courses that are hard to figure out what the teachers want, you have to satisfy teachers who have all kinds of strange ideas about things, and if you're a senior in college, you have to what? Start sorting out what you're going to do for a career or an occupation or a job. It just so basically it seems like that. Now, did some of you start working at a job during adolescence? You did. Anybody else? You did. About half of you. See, when our girls were adolescents, I still remember they said, Dad, my friend is turning 16 and her parents are buying her a car for her birthday. Are you going to buy me a car when I turn 16? I said, girl, if you want a car when you turn 16, you better get a job and start earning some money so you can buy a car at 16. So she went to work, started earning money to set aside to buy a car. And I had some friends, dear friends at church, who said to me, Tom, I just don't think it's a good idea to have your daughter work during her high school years. That ought to be a fun time in life. And working, you're going to have to do that the rest of your life, so you ought to save that for later. And I said, you know, I can see why you're raising your daughter that way, but I said, you have a high-paying job where if your daughter wants a car when she's 16, you can buy her one. If my daughter wants a car when she's 16, she's going to have some money to help pay for it. So I told her to go to work. And I said, I went to work as a teenager and it didn't hurt me. And then he says, are you sure? And I'm going, well, I don't know. Maybe it did and I'm not aware of it. But that's what I told my daughter. And so she got a job and went to work and started saving her money. And then her little sister said, so are you going to, and then when she got some money saved, I helped her buy a car. So her little sister said, Dad, are you going to do that for me when I'm 16? And she was only like 13 or something. I said, yeah. So she starts saving all of her babysitting money and everything she does and squirreling it away so that when it came time to buy a car, she could buy a bigger car or more of a car than her sister did. And I thought, boy, that was a bad idea. I'm glad I only have 2 children. I don't have a third one coming along who's going to cash in on that program again. But God gave us 2 daughters that we could afford to raise, and it all worked out. But you understand that some people look at adolescence as a time for just growing and developing without a lot of responsibility. And other people feel like, no, adolescents need to learn to be responsible for certain things. And you'll have different opinions about it. If you're raised in a home where you were not given a lot of responsibility as an adolescent, guess what? You'll learn the responsibility real fast as a young adult. If you were given a lot of responsibility as an adolescent, then you'll be ahead of the game when you encounter other adolescents who haven't had that kind of upbringing. All of us are unique. Okay, have we all had a unique upbringing? Even though you have siblings, your parents still treated you a certain way. So, and most parents will say, well, I treat my children differently because they are different. So, you see, it's just like we've all had a unique upbringing. And since we're talking about that, often adolescents like to blame their parents for some of their problems. You can't blame stuff on parents. If you're aware of a parent not doing something for you, then find someone who will help you learn that skill. And once you're aware of your shortcomings or what you need to learn, then it becomes your responsibility to figure out how to learn it. I've often, when I worked with junior high kids especially, they'd complain about their parents, so I'd draw a line down the middle of the board and say, let's put on one side of the board all the things that are wrong with your parents. And they just would fill it up in a hurry. I said, now let's put on the other side of the board all the things that are wrong with adolescents. I mean, this is what parents do that bother you. Let's talk about what adolescents do that bother their parents. And everybody's just sitting there like, I can't think of anything. Come on. The bottom line is what? We like to point out other age groups' shortcomings, but we're reluctant to point out our own. And once you realize that if I'm going to be honest, if I'm going to make a list of what my parents did wrong, I need to make a list of what I did wrong. Like sometimes I've said, how come I didn't get saved till I was 18? Why didn't those Christians in high school witness to me? Well, what kind of person were you in high school, Tom? Were you the kind of person that would make a Christian think, I'll go witness to him? Or did the Christians think, if I witness to him, he might bless me in the mouth? You understand? I wasn't necessarily the most appealing prospect for someone to witness to during high school. But so it doesn't matter. I got saved when I was 18 after I got out of high school. So praise the Lord. I got saved, whether it happened at 18 or whether it happened at 8. I'm a child of God. Praise the Lord. Let's keep moving. Don't dwell on the past. Don't worry about the future. Just take it a day at a time and live for the Lord. Okay, we've got to quit, don't we? So we'll pick up here with these stages of development on Wednesday. What's going on?